sole source for live meetings. The Government Channel presents
Welcome to Straightforward Conversation. I'm Gary Hunter. My guest this evening is Virginia May, County Superintendent of the Athens County Schools. Virginia has a bachelor's degree from Ohio University and a master's degree also from Ohio University and several administrative certifications from Ashland University. She's been an elementary school teacher, an assistant superintendent of the Athens County Schools, the superintendent at Trimble Local Schools, and is currently serving as the superintendent of Athens County Schools. Today's topic is the county school system. Welcome, Virginia.
Thank you, Gary.
I think you indicated to me before we started to come on the air tonight that the term Athens County Schools is not exactly the appropriate terminology. So I'm going to give you a chance to correct me right off the bat and tell me what is the appropriate name for the Athens County Schools right now.
Well, the Athens County School District is officially named the Athens County Educational Service Center. And in many places in Ohio, several of the old term county offices have gone together and become service centers. And so there's a requirement that you must have 8,000 children ADM in order to remain a service center. And we have just recently signed agreements with Nelsonville York City Schools and the Athens City Schools to provide some services to them because we're a total county service center now.
I think the viewers may be interested in knowing the breakdown of how schools are structured in Ohio. I know we have city school districts that you mentioned. We have local school districts such as Trimble and Alexander and Federal Hocking. And then we have this umbrella called the county school system. What's the interplay, or what is this?
There's another independent there. There's the exempted villages that are still out there. There's only about 20 of those left in Ohio. But in the county system, as you ask me, it was many years ago when there was the smaller districts such as Trimble, Alexander, and Federal Hocking at one.
Plains.
Yeah, the Plains. You had, I think you had Jacksonville, Trimble. You had Waterloo. You had Shade.
Albany, Shade.
Just on and on and on. But they did consolidate some of those, and what they did is they put them kind of under the umbrella of the county office, and the county office was to provide supervisory services so that each of these school districts did not have to have all individual special education people that they've added and different curriculum people and all these service providers that must be there. And also at one time there was a difference in the certification for a local superintendent and a county superintendent, and that is no longer. People that have been certified within the last 5 years, everyone holds the same certification, so that's even changed. But at the present time, it was really always meant to be more of a service provider for the smaller school districts. It was an umbrella service provider.
I seem to remember many years ago when I went to the Plains High School that our highest ranking official at the Plains was the principal, Herman Humphrey, that many people remember here in the Athens area. Now we have local school districts that have a superintendent, and then your title is also superintendent. What's the interplay between those two positions now?
Well, the interplay between that now is that at the local level, the superintendent takes care of all the day-to-day operations, everything that has to be taken care of within the confines of that, the busing, the sports programs, all the food service, all those things are under the local level. We are at the county level the liaison for the state, with the State Department of Education and with the legislators, and we also provide the services such as the supervisory special education, preschool. We have the attendance officer out of our office. We also have the occupational therapist, the physical therapist, work-study coordinator, several of those different kinds of programs that service all of the schools.
I know there used to be an anomaly in the law, and I don't know whether it still exists or not. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but we used to have the situation where a local school superintendent would, as you say, would be in charge of the day-to-day functions with one sort of modified exception. That was the actual signing off of hiring of employees, and the county superintendent technically, quote, was supposed to recommend that to the local board of education. And so we went through this kind of charade, if you will, of sending requests down, the county superintendent eventually signing off and coming back to local boards. Is that still the situation?
That's still part of the law. That,
is there a reason for that?
That at one time, as I said, at one time the local superintendent certification was different from the county superintendent, and I think that was where it started many years ago. It's still a part of the law, and technically we are supposed to certify all employees, certified employees, such as the teachers and all of the administrators. And we do that, and we keep all of the records for the 3 counties in our office. All certification is done in our office, and as well as all bus driver certification is done in our office for the 3 districts.
But as far as actually reviewing qualifications of employees, it's pretty much a rubber stamp, if you will, of what the local superintendent recommends to you.
We have discussions, and it is the local decision. We want them to have who they want in their classroom. There are times that the county superintendent will be involved, and there are times that the county superintendent have in the past interviewed candidates, but for the most part our locals do choose the people that they want in their classrooms, and then we work with them and make sure the certification, that's one of the big jobs that we do, is once they tell us who they want, we have to look at the certification. We have to have all the original transcripts and have all that for the state and send it into the state in order to get their certification, so that we can say it's okay to hire this person.
The interesting thing I seem to remember is doing some work in the school district area is that while you have a role as a county superintendent in the employment of, say, a teacher or the employment of a non-certificated employee, the termination process, you're almost cut out of that process, is my recollection. That is almost a function of the local superintendent and the local board of education.
Well, we as far as saying we actually do, perform the termination, no. But the thing of it is, we're in an advisory role, and at any time that the local superintendent or the local boards request us to be involved as far as something that goes as advisory, collecting information, doing research and those kinds of things, that's the kind of services that we provide to them.
Where does the funding come from for a county school district?
We get a certain amount of the state foundation program. Right now, for the ADM of each of the 3 county locals, we receive $6.50 per child into our office to provide these services to them. Any excess cost of any of the programs then are charged back to any of the schools that participate, the locals as well as the city districts.
And what kind of staffing does your office have?
At the present time, we have 38 employees, and several of these employees are grant funded. We have a large preschool grant which covers the public preschools that are in place in this county at the present time, and that has a staff of probably, some of the schools hire their own people and we provide them with money, but then the actual people we hire, we probably have around 10 employees that work within the confines of the county in the preschools. Again, you have other grants. We have Project Life with the work study people that have a couple of people, and then you have special education, which we have 7 units of our own that we provide for the county for the special education people. We have teachers, aides, and supervisors that work actually for us, and we provide the educational services for these SBH and MH classes.
Where is your office located?
We're located in the old Morrison School Building on the lower level.
In Richland Avenue here?
On Richland Avenue.
And there also is a county board of education, if my memory serves me right, too, is there not?
Which is now called the governing board of the
Excuse me.
Athens County Educational Service Center. And they have the charge of overseeing all the operation of our office and to make sure that we maintain all the proper legal certifications and things for the locals, and provide the services in a way that the locals would like to have them.
Well, stay tuned. Virginia and I will be back after this commercial break. When we return, I want to ask Virginia about equity in school funding. Welcome back to Straightforward Conversation. My guest this evening is Virginia May, Superintendent of the Athens County School System, or the Educational Service Center, as Virginia has corrected me. Before the break, Virginia, we were about to discuss the Coalition for Equity and Adequacy in School Funding, and I believe you've served on an advisory capacity in that. And we all know that there's a great deal of controversy, to say the least, in the state of Ohio right now over school funding. Could you tell me a little bit about what's going on in the area of adequacy and equity in school funding?
Well, Gary, I've served on the steering committee since its inception in the late 80s, early 90s when we first started with this. And as you know, they've had their last arguments before the Ohio Supreme Court, and we're awaiting their decision. We feel like that the arguments that were presented were very well received, and we're hoping, of course, for an affirmative decision. However, I believe at this time that whether we receive a positive decision from the Supreme Court or not, that we have made a lot of people aware of what actually is happening in the school funding, and what a difficult situation it is to be in the trying to be a CEO of a corporation that you never know what funding is coming in, and you have no way of increasing the revenue without going through levies and different things like that. So I think that the time has come that people will demand that their legislators, whether this case wins in the courts or not, but they do something that will make it fair and equitable for all children to receive an education. It's only common sense to know that we should be putting our money into educating children rather than welfare or prisons. And I believe that if we did a better job in that respect, and that we wouldn't have the other problems maybe so prevalent.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. Well, you might refresh our listeners' recollection on exactly what the court case is trying to assert. What kind of equity are you trying to achieve? How are you trying to reach that equity?
Actually, we're trying to get the state to say that it is every child's right to have an education.
Free and appropriate education.
Right. And that is basically the one thing that we've been trying to get approved all along, and it seems to be a real problem with the state to recognize this very pertinent factor. And the other thing is just the fact that to realize that there are people who would even question that it's not every child's right to have an appropriate education. I think that it was very aptly said at the town meeting that was held in Dublin just recently, which was the spinoff for this film that I brought in for Children in America's School. And a young lady from Benton County stood up and looked at one of our state legislatures and said, "Just tell me I'm not worth the money, the same as someone that lives in a district where there are better property tax base and where there's industry." You know,
you might hold this video up so that our
this was shown on PBS several times, and we're trying to get it shown again and again so that we could be able to have more people, just the general public, be knowledgeable on the facts of school funding. It's not that we want to take away from the rich to give to the poor, but we want the state to meet their obligations for all of our children. It's not fair that the children in some of these districts are in basements that have water running through them trying to get an education when you have someone in the north that has a swimming pool and all the things that are would be extras to us. And so we're just really trying to get, at this point, the public awareness and the general public's backing that school funding must change, whether the court case comes out negative or positive for us. We've worked very hard with that court case, and of course I'm a real believer in this. It's one of the things that I felt like that every child should be able to have a good education. I think that you can solve a lot of problems if we are better educating our students.
This video that you've mentioned here that is available for the public to view, was that something prepared outside of Ohio, or is that something that was actually prepared here in Ohio?
Well, we were very pleased, and it kind of fell into our laps a real piece of luck. Is Jeff Hayden and Eva Marie Saint had decided to do a documentary on the schools in America. And they were looking around for a place to do this, and they happened to come to Ohio, and for some unknown reason they ended up with Bill Phillis, who is our executive director. And of course, most people know that Bill Phillis was once upon a time Assistant Superintendent of Instruction for the state of Ohio, and has been a real believer that all boys and girls receive a fair shake. And so they ended up with him, and he took them on a tour of Ohio, and they said, we don't need to go to Nevada or Montana or Florida to make this movie, that this movie can be made in Ohio because we have found the worst conditions in schools and we have found some of the best conditions in schools. So it was made here, and a couple of the buildings that were shown in this, one of them was Nelsonville York's old middle school, and the other was Vinton County schools, as well as the Dublin schools and the Beechwood schools and things that are really terrific schools, you know, new school buildings. So the school facilities issue is a big issue with this, with the equity funding.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you that school facilities is a major piece in the puzzle of providing an appropriate education to all. But I also think curriculum development and discipline are two other areas that have to be adequately addressed in Ohio. Is there a role of the Educational Service Center in curriculum development?
Yes, we have on staff 3 curriculum people, and they each are placed in a district, one for Trimble, one for Alexander, and one for Federal Hocking. And they work on a day-to-day basis with the administrators and the teachers and the students to provide the kind of curriculum that will enhance all the things that we believe in as far as giving a good education to our students. And we try to make sure that it meets the state requirements as well as the local wishes also.
Is there a standardization of curriculum between school districts?
Yes, in Ohio they have model curriculums in all of the main areas, such as your English and your reading and your math, social studies, and science has just this year. And I think that health education is on its way, as well as the arts and other curriculum.
Very interesting. Stay tuned. Virginia and I will return after this commercial break, and we'll pick up on the topic of discipline in schools. And then I want to ask Virginia, towards the end of this segment coming up, about where she thinks the future of education of our youth lies. Welcome back to Straightforward Conversation. My guest this evening is Virginia May of the Athens County Education Service Center, or some facsimile thereof. Virginia, before the break we were going to discuss about discipline in schools. Is there a problem with discipline in our local schools in Athens County?
Well, I think that there's a problem with discipline in any school in the state of Ohio, or maybe in America at this point. I think there's been a lot of changes that we've seen our families go through. We've seen just society in general has changed. So yes, there are discipline problems. I think that the schools in Athens County as a whole work very hard to try to meet the needs of the children to alleviate some of these problems. I see a lot of people trying to do different programs on conflict resolution. I see peer mediation, these different things, the Quest program, anything that they think will work to make sure that the kids have a better feeling about themselves, so there'll be less discipline problems. They try to work very closely with the families and then get them involved in school. So I would have to say yes, there is a problem, but I think there's a lot being done to alleviate some of the problems.
Is there a role for your office in assisting in developing better discipline in schools?
We have worked through basically our curriculum coordinators providing our superintendents with research and different things that needs to be done on that basis, and on an as-need basis for any of the in-services that need to be done. We try to play a part in that for all of our local districts.
I think that we've all are aware that parochial schools use uniforms and have for many, many years for their students as a way of addressing not only discipline but the issues of peer pressure among students. Is the time right for uniforms to be introduced into public school systems?
Well, I think certainly that there could be maybe a little stricter dress code. I probably will have a lot of people that will disagree with me, but having a 30-year veteran of the classroom and of the administration, I do think that there is a place for stricter dress codes. I think that the fact that we see the threat of gangs moving into smaller places from our cities such as Chicago now, that we're hearing things such as Parkersburg and Huntington. Who knows that Athens would be next, and you know the colors that go with this kind of thing. I think that you're looking at something that may become a necessity in the public schools in order to be able to say that, you know, we have some discipline in that area too. I wouldn't advocate this on a big basis, but I think it's something that will have to be looked at in the future.
Seems to me, and this is just a personal observation, that some of the discipline problems in schools flowed more severely after the massive consolidations that occurred in the 60s, where we took all of the small local school systems in small each little villages around the state of Ohio and started consolidating them into bigger and bigger school districts. Do you think that that massive consolidation, as I refer to it, of the 60s has proved to be beneficial in the 90s?
I think that you get beyond the point of economies if you get too large, because I think you do lose that closeness. And you know that if your teacher knows your dad or your mom, there's a little less discipline problems than if you're in a school where there's thousands of kids and no one knows anyone. And I think that that we did lose something in that respect. I think that we may have gained other things where we could offer maybe better courses and more courses and different things like that. But we did lose that closeness and that personal relationship.
We live in an age of information, computers, and tremendous amounts of stress upon our young people. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes now to kind of summarize for me where you think education is going in the future so that we can adequately address this information explosion that students have to be aware of and utilize, and the technology that they have to be aware of for the future.
Well, one of the things that I heard when I first was introduced to a lot of technology back in late 70s, early 80s, was that along with this high technology, you have to have high touch. So that means that our schools are going to be also having to deal with the fact that we can't isolate people with the technology, but use them for the benefit. But there has to be, continue to be interpersonal relationships given consideration also. So I think it's very important. I love technology. I love to spend my time working with computers, but I also, comes a time when you get tired of that machine and you need to be dealing with people. So I do think the schools will have the interpersonal relationships to deal with as well as the technology.
You think that will solve some of the stress problems that we're placing upon our students today?
I think that's another thing that we have to deal with, is the stress that to achieve. I think that sometimes that kids are not allowed to be kids anymore, and that they grow up too quickly. And so I think that that's another thing that we're going to have to deal with, and I think that America as a whole needs to look at their young race and decide, you know, we want them to be smart, we want them to have every advantage, but at what price? Maybe we need to let them be children for a little while longer.
I certainly agree with you. Thank you, Virginia. This has been Straightforward Conversation. My guest this evening has been Virginia May, Superintendent of the Athens County School Systems, or the Educational Service Center as it's now known. Good evening.